Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Dennis Giannoutzis. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutzis.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to 2025. I want to say thank you for tuning in to the Leadership is Changing podcast. But as we step into a brand new year, I want to take a moment to reflect on the incredible journey we've had in 2024. Over the past year, I've been privileged to feature some amazing guests on this podcast, leaders, change makers, and innovators who shared their wisdom, experiences, and insights. And together we've explored what it means to lead in today's ever-changing world. Over the next month, we're going to bring you some of these highlights. And in the Highlights 2024 episodes, we're bringing you some of the most impactful moments and key takeaways from 2024. Now, these highlights capture the essence of what this podcast is all about, helping leaders like you thrive in times of change and complexity. Now, whether it's tips on being courageous, thinking outside the box, adapting, or navigating transitions to higher levels of leadership, these snippets are sure to inspire and energize you for the year ahead. And of course, these highlights are just the tip of the iceberg. If something resonates with you, I encourage you to go and check out the full interviews from 2024 to dive deeper into the incredible conversations we've had. So let's get into it. Here are the highlights from 2024 on the Leadership is Changing podcast.
So I grew up in a third-generation family business, AUI, or Associated Underwriters Insurance, so that's why we shortened it to AUI. We do employee benefits for small businesses. And then once I purchased that business in 2019, I also launched a startup called Clarity HR, which does small business fractional HR for organizations that do not need a full-time human resources person. In addition, I am co-captain of Team Awesome Sauce. So when you have 4 people with 3 different last names, a mom who builds businesses and a dad who played team sports, you get a team name, team logo, team purpose statement. Our mission is we radiate awesome to the world. Our motto is put more awesome in the sauce. And so that is the name of our entrepreneurial family.
Oh, very cool. That's excellent. Now, the Clarity HR, that is when you say fractional HR, for our listeners' sake, I think that's what you mean by that is where you, as you said, an organization can't afford a full-time HR person or experience and so forth, but they can go out and buy it, but they can go out and also have someone come in and do a couple hours a week or one day a week. How does that work?
Exactly. So we give you the flexibility to have us as much or as little as you need us in your organization, whether it's an hour per month or 20 hours a week. So it's really flexible for a small business owner. And what we try to do is either we coach a client in how to answer questions, empower them to make decisions around their people, or if they go, I don't want to have those conversations myself, or I don't want to do all the work, will you do it for us? The answer, of course, is yes.
And how come if you were doing insurance, what made you think about wanting to do HR?
So it was an interesting story. So one of our clients that we've had for over a decade had continued to say, hey, you do benefits really well, which is a space oftentimes considered in human resources. So would you think about doing HR? And I said no for years, partly because I didn't own the business. So that was number one. I didn't want to make the business even more profitable and have to pay even more for it. But the other part was HR scared me. I didn't want to hire someone who knew how to hire and how to fire them. And then what happens if we're in this toxic relationship and I don't know how to fire them as a person? So I was really afraid of that space. So I got a call while I was on vacation right after I had bought AUI. And they said, look, if you're willing to try it, if it doesn't work out, we'll pretend like we never had this conversation. You can name it a different name. You can do a different thing. And I was like, fine. So I guess the good thing is I'll start businesses when I'm on vacation. But the other part was it's been extremely successful. Clarity turns 5 this year. And we've continued to grow and expand. And what I love is our purpose statement for AUI and Clarity, because we have one unifying purpose statement. for our culture is we provide peace of mind by simplifying the complicated. So we're taking something that can sometimes be overwhelming to a small business owner, how to deal with their human capital, and we're making it simple for them. So I love the weight that I can see lifted off of business owners' shoulders as we continue to help.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, and you're right. It is a lot of pressure on them, and they don't know where to go, what to do. And nowadays they're finding, and we'll get into more of these questions later on, but they're tending to find that they're having to be a little bit more PC, and they're a little bit afraid to make a decision or do things, and thinking about the kind of not just workload, but also problems they may have later on with people. And you thought about this idea on a holiday, or you started it
On a holiday.
Yeah.
Started it on a holiday, thought about it, said yes while we were on a holiday, started it on a holiday, came back and continued to grow. And I was able to find someone to start the company as our first employee, our first HR person. Not only was she had decades of HR experience, she was also an attorney. So on top of hiring something that I thought was going to intimidate me, I hired a lawyer on top of all of it. So I guess it was go big or go home.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And was that the person sitting around the pool as well that you happened to meet and say, let's start a business?
Oh, I wish. That would make the story even better.
It would indeed. And tell me your background as well, an author of a book, Reluctantly Resilient. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So Reluctantly Resilient it's a CEO's journey in thriving and figuring out all of the different things that we do in work, in life. And sometimes we're resilient not because we always want to be, we're resilient because we have to be. And so I take a transition that I was in business, and I suffered a business hurricane and a personal hurricane at the same time. In that in 2013, I lost my first husband to suicide. And then 30 days later, we had a major shift in our business with the Affordable Care Act. So learning how to navigate some of those things, becoming more mindful, becoming more present, working on transitioning a family business. So these are some of the things that I talk about in Reluctantly Resilient, how to continue to build yourself and build your leadership as you continue to grow as a person and continue to build your resilience as you go through life, because it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond in the aftermath.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, isn't it? It comes down to how we react to things and then what we do with that, which is easy to talk about now. I'm pretty sure in the midst of it, when it was actually happening, it wasn't easy.
Oh no, kicking and screaming through life is pretty much, I would say, how I described it.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people do face every single day, is that there's so much going on for them that they are kicking and screaming. But I think the thing is, it's how we can calm things down a bit, or maybe even put it another way, it's about, as you're saying, being resilient. It's actually you being in control. It's actually you taking control, or feeling like you're in control and being able to move forward, which I think is really important, because otherwise you do feel like you're kicking and screaming everywhere and you just don't know which way you're going, which way's up, which way's down, and it can be quite difficult.
Yes.
Now, leadership. How did you actually get into leadership yourself?
So there's a couple of different ways. I would say from birth, I've always just been in that space where you find yourself either in charge or not necessarily in charge, but responsible for key items, key things. So there's always that space on the playground. You're the bossy kid. That's totally fine. That's the first walking into leadership. And then I would say growing up in a family business, leadership was not bestowed upon me, but there was this quiet expectation of you will lead by example. You may not have the authority, but you will be the person that you need to be to accomplish things. So I would say as I've continued to grow in my career, it's been something that I've pursued more actively. But initially, it's always been the show up, volunteer, lead by example.
Yeah,
Serve before.
Serve before, nice. I like that too. Yeah, and
Yeah.
serve before meaning what though? In other words, it's leading by example, but also being there to serve and look after people. Is that what you're saying?
That, and then also the fact of like the leaders eat last. So always knowing that your team comes before you, the mission comes before you. How can you make sure that everyone is moving in the same direction and has the resources that they need? How do you care for everyone around you so that you can achieve everything together?
Yeah, great, excellent. That leaders eat last, or even just serving first to make sure everyone's okay. I think that's very important. Even when I'm speaking or facilitating events, they may put on lunches and things like that. I will not touch the lunch. I will not even go near it or line up until I know that everyone else in the room, the participants, the guests, the client, everyone else has eaten before I go. And the reason I do that is because it's about them, and it's about them looking after them. It's not about me. And I think a lot of leaders think about themselves a lot. Now, there's a balance here, and I want to get your point of view here, because I think we do need to look after others and serve, but we also need to serve ourselves at times. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, absolutely. When we talk about balance, we talk about being mindful and caring for ourselves so that we can care for others. I think that there is a component of leadership where you need to be selfish to be able to be selfless. So making sure that you maintain, whether it's meditation, exercise, a good diet, a really good sleep routine, making sure that you take care of yourself and also invest in yourself in tools and resources to continue to grow as a leader. Because I think that as leadership continues to evolve over the next decade, being able to be agile and being able to learn new things and respond quickly is really important.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. I always like to tell folks that a podcast changed the course and trajectory of my life. And there's always this kind of moment of anticipation right as we hit record where I wonder, hey, could this do that same thing for somebody else?
Yeah, I'm sure there's somebody listening to this right today that could be the one thing that could help them grow their business, their leadership, or help them change things in life. Do you know what? This is something I actually say, Scott, to people when I'm speaking on stage or I'm facilitating an event or even coaching. Take notes. And I go, take notes. Make sure you're taking notes all the time. A leader does that. And then I ask them, do they know why? And it could be this one word, this one comment, this one experience, this one quote, something that could be the thing that changes things going forward. And I like what you just said right at the beginning, right up front. It could be something that could be change to help things move along, which is very good. Hey, Scott, I've given it an introduction to you, but before I do that, whereabouts in the world are you today?
I am in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're just coming up on summers, which here in Atlanta are hot, and I love it. So it's getting warmer, and I'm getting happier and happier.
Have you gone to daylight saving?
We have, yes. We're on daylight or Eastern Daylight Time. Although Congress keeps telling us they're going to quit. And I will rejoice the day that they do because it messes me up 2 weeks out of every year.
Oh, yeah.
Springing forward and falling back, it gets me every time.
Yeah, it does. We're going back very soon. We're going back 1 hour. So we're going into autumn now, or into fall, as you call it, in the States. So we're going that. So it's a different part of the world here and than it is actually in the US. But it's amazing how we all experience different things. Do you love spring? Do you love that new start?
Yeah, so spring means pollen here in Georgia. Anyone who knows my voice can hear a little bit of that in here. So I can't say that spring's my favorite. I like it hot. Like I like the summer. That's my happy place.
Excellent. How hot does it get?
So Celsius gets into 25, 30, maybe 35 on an odd day, but it's just around that 25 to 30 as the high most of the summer.
Excellent. Gets up there. It's interesting. So a little bit of background about you. What do you do? I understand that you're the founder of Scaled Architects, but I want you to explain to the listeners what you do. But tell us more about your background, where you've come from, and so forth. So yeah, let us know.
Yeah, so I was 21 when I founded my first kind of real business, me and a business partner. A whole saga that went into that wasn't really intentional at all, but I find myself there September 2008, right? Not a great time to start a business. And he and I are trying to make this thing work. And I was every bit as young and dumb as you would expect from a 21-year-old. I made all the mistakes. And it's one of those times when we succeeded largely despite me, not because of me. And we did it through just grit and determination. It's that classic entrepreneurial story. We were working out of my business partner's basement for a while, and then we got kicked out by the homeowners association. It was just like a series of just silly things that we did, but it worked really well. And these numbers still sound fake to me. I haven't even found a way of convincing myself that this is true, but it really happened. We helped start around 20,000 businesses and nonprofits. Like, again, even I say that all the time. We did it. It was a lot of work getting there, but that number is still such a big number. And during that same time, we were having nearly triple digit growth year after year. And it was just a ton of fun. I just fell in love with this thing we call entrepreneurism, with being a founder. It wasn't always easy. It was hardly ever easy, but it was a lot of fun. And fast forward probably 5, 6, almost 7 years of just doing this. And I started to fall in love with business books, ran a lot on leadership, a lot on entrepreneurism, a lot on how to lead business as well. Collins and Lencioni and Wickman are the big names here in the US, and learned a lot from that. Was able to apply a lot from that. And I think a significant testament to our growth was just our ability to take those things and apply them to what we're doing. But I remember one year we would regularly be in the mid-20s on our profit margin. And that was great. And one year dipped a little bit and we're like, but just that happens. It'll be fine next year. Then it dipped again. And then we tried all this stuff. What about this or that? Or we tried to turn everything and dial it all in. And it dropped again the third year, the biggest 1-year drop ever. We got all the way down from the mid-20s to 7% profit margins, which at the end of the day, like what we were doing was really meaningful and important to us, but a profit margin that low, and you're right on the cusp of, we might not be here if you follow this trajectory. And what was really hard about it is it wasn't that it just dropped to 7% because we weren't paying attention, right? It wasn't that we weren't trying to fix it. And as cool as I thought I was as a leader and a founder and a business person, all of that illusion went away. And I found myself just kind of, what am I going to do now? And so we really didn't do a whole lot with business coaches or consultants in the early days. We didn't really feel like we needed to. And while they may have helped us move a little bit faster, I don't know that we really needed to go faster. We were going pretty quick. And so this idea of, hey, let's go out and find help. Let's go hire a coach or consultant or someone who can help us solve some of these challenges, get our profitability back so we can grow again. And so we went out, we hired 3 different coaches, coach, consultant, advisor, that whole gamut. And every single one of them failed us pretty miserably. In fact, I lost more money following the advice, the ill-suited but well-meaning advice of coaches than I ever did on any deal that I had made on my own. And there's a whole lot to be said about the coaching industry and how we use coaches and all of that, which plays a bigger role later in my story. But the thing that I want to dial in on here, the thing that was such a big deal for me was not just that I had bad coaches. It was that I had enough of them to feel like now I was really alone, right? If we can't figure it out and we can't hire someone to figure it out, is this it? Is this just what we've signed up for from now on, that we're going to constantly be fighting this profit thing, that my leadership team is going to be fighting with each other? Because when it's going well, everyone gets along. But when it's not going well, right, you start, fingers are pointing, and I feel like I'm babysitting and firefighting, and it was just a rather miserable time, quite frankly. Now, from the outside in, we're adding $1 million a year to our top line. We've got this multi-million-dollar business. It looks like it should be going great, but inside I felt like I was dying. And it was during a particularly bad month. I'm driving in my truck. And I hear this guy come on to a podcast with, I've got my American accent, you've got your New Zealand. We'll add one to the mix here. He's got this funny Irish accent. Now, he's a dear friend of mine, so I can say that now. But I think it was the accent that kept me on, because it was probably one of the more boring topics that you could listen to. But he had me just enough. And he starts talking about this idea of life cycle stages. And it was the very first time that I felt like I was on a map as a founder. It was the very first time that I felt like somebody actually knew what was going on. And so from a combination of his work and insight into how the challenges we were facing as a company and I as a leader and founder were changing. And I also, at the same time, I got connected with a local coach here in Atlanta who was just a remarkable person. And those 2 guys together not only changed the course of our business, we tripled our bottom line in 3 years, but they also helped me as a leader recognize my role in that. I had to rework how I spent my time. I had to rework my team and who I had around me, and we had to rework our tactics. And in the course of that, again, we had this remarkable business transformation, which was awesome. But the real thing I got out of it was I fell in love with the process of that transformation. I realized that in going through that, my real passion was not the next milestone for our business. It was helping others to avoid the same pain and mistakes that I experienced. And so that's what got me into this business now. I sold that company and moved into creating this company called Scale Architects. And what we do is exactly that. We help founders navigate the stages of growth so they can show up as exactly the leader they need to be.
Excellent. Oh, wow. What an awesome story, background, what you've actually experienced as well. And originally, how did you actually get into leadership yourself? Was it through the actual first business, or was it something else?
Yeah, it sure was. At the ripe old age of 21, I didn't really have any chance to do it before that. So it's like I was a captain of my middle school soccer team, I think. Yeah, but that was about it. So funny, the very first executive team meeting I was ever in, I was supposed to lead. Right? I had no idea what I was supposed to be doing. It was probably one of the more embarrassing meetings of my career. I was awkward. I was uncomfortable. I felt way out of place. It was imposter syndrome. I made the whole thing about me when my whole goal was to actually make it about the folks that were there, to invite them into kind of our inner circle. Funny, it was just a couple weeks later, I saw Dan Cathy speak. He's the president and CEO of a big restaurant chain out here. called Chick-fil-A, and a second generation leader. And he's just like that quintessential leader. And when I saw him, they were going through a massive crisis at the company, and he was just the poise and the steadiness. He had every reason to make this talk that I was about him and about the things that were going on in his world, and he didn't. He took the time to make it about us. And those two experiences back to back, right? My failure and his success, just being able to contrast those, it was a remarkable lesson for me as a leader.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.